slept with my boss once to get promoted, but now I'm doing it almost every day and my man caught up. I know what I'm about to tell you all right now might sound disgusting, but trust me, I'm not also proud with what I did either. I hate to admit that I slept with my boss so as to get promoted, but I ended up going back to him until karma dealt with me really hard. I never thought I would be the type of person to cheat on my husband. Growing up, I always held myself to high moral standards and vowed to never betray my partner. But one night, everything changed. My husband didn't take it easy when he got to know about my affair, most especially when he got to know that my affair partner was my boss. My name is Winnie. I am 35 years old. My husband's name is Jordan. He is 37 years old. I work at an editorial company, but unfortunately, I'm no longer working there anymore. I was dismissed from the office the day my affair with my boss was made known to the public. That day was one of the worst days of my life, and I feel so ashamed about it. Jordan and I have been together for 7 years. We met at an auction which was organized by his father. Apparently, I was able to attend the auction that day because Jordan's brother, Luke, had invited me. Luke was my classmate from college. We weren't that pretty close, but we were just mutual friends. Luke was a lousy type and also very annoying back then. But as time went on, we became friends and invited me to the event. Jordan and I met at the auction and we became close since then and eventually got married to each other a few months later. Jordan is a nice guy. Back then, he was the type that likes trying out new things and was very smart. After our wedding, Jordan and I relocated and started a new life somewhere far away from our hometown. It was there that I got employed as an intern at the company I worked for. Jordan was a businessman, but despite that, our relationship was very strong. Jordan always made out time for me, and he made sure I never complained or lacked anything. After 3 years of our relocation, Jordan partially moved to another city due to his nature of job. My husband only comes back every Friday and spends the weekend with me before going back. It was tough and rough for us at first, but we later got used to it. We often spend time talking on the phone and video calling each other. My husband and I spent hours talking about how our day went and made a little chit-chat on random stuff. It was quite interesting, and during that period, I always looked forward to midnight so we could talk. In the 3rd year of our marriage, I wasn't an intern any longer. I was promoted to be on one of the marketing teams. I was happy, and I devoted my time to my work. I was always punctual and did whatever I was being told. That gave me a good record, which made me to be the first to be promoted among other interns that resumed with me. The feeling of being promoted made me work harder. I wanted to not only be on a marketing team, but also to be on a high rank. I wasn't happy with the position I was at that time because it was more challenging and cumbersome. At some point, I and some of my colleagues had to work late nights. Despite my promotion, some high-ranking colleagues made me work more than my stipulated time. They even sent me on errands that were meant for an intern. It was so frustrating that I wanted to badly get promoted to the next level. I couldn't tell anyone about it, not even my boss, because I might get into trouble or could even get fired instantly. My boss was a strict type that did not condone any form of lateness, not to talk of laziness. I kept up with some of the people that bullied me and didn't say anything. As time went on, I discovered that my boss was notorious for only promoting those who he had a personal relationship with. I got to know this through one of my coworkers, Pia. Pia was one of the oldest and highest-ranked workers in the company. She wasn't like the others that were mean. Pia was calm and friendly, and she often eases my work anytime she is in the office. As a result, I opened up to her about some of the challenges I faced at work, and also told her about my desperation to get promoted. The level I was getting a toll on me and badly wanted a promotion. She watched me rant and burst into laughter after I was done talking. I was pissed at her actions. I didn't understand why she had to laugh when I was talking about a serious issue. Pia, however, apologized. It was then she told me the dirty secret about our boss, how he slept with some of the female staff just to get them promoted. I was shocked at first, but at the same time wasn't surprised after all because my boss looked like the playboy type. But he does know how to look strict anytime he is in the office. To even sum the whole thing up, the mean ones among the co-workers were the ones that got their hands dirty for the promotion. I didn't judge them because I also wanted to get promoted. I was desperate to climb the corporate ladder, and so I decided to take a risk and sleep with him. After my conversation with Pia that day, I made up my mind to also give it a try. But I didn't inform her about it. Pia was a lady that never got her hands dirty to attain any position. If I had told her that very day, she would have countered it and dismissed that idea. Of course, I didn't want that to happen. A few months after that conversation, I mustered the courage to do it. It was a tough decision for me, but I had to anyway. I said to myself that one time wouldn't hurt. At least no one would know about it. My husband didn't even know about my hunt for a new promotion. If he had known about it, he would have asked me why the rush, because at that time I was barely 4 years into the job. I had been working at the company for 5 years and had my sights set on a promotion. It was at that time I got to understand that hard work and patience truly pays. Pia told me how hard she worked and how long she waited before she got promoted. At that time, I wasn't ready for that because I wanted to teach those that bullied me and some of the interns a lesson. And so I decided to also get my hands dirty. The day I made up my mind to sleep with my boss, I had mixed feelings. I kept thinking about what would happen after it. I kept asking myself if he would get me promoted after it, or would just want to have fun with me and I would not even get the promotion. After much thought, I decided to take the risk. When I told my boss about my decision, he had this weird smirk on his face. It was at that moment I knew he had been doing this with other female staff long before my employment. We booked a hotel that day and we secretly headed there after work. It was one night of passion and I was able to secure the promotion I had been dreaming of. But I wasn't as excited as I imagined I would be after getting the promotion. The guilt of cheating on my husband was something I had to deal with for weeks. Even when Jordan came visiting during the weekends, I wasn't that excited. I felt pity for him and I was ashamed of myself. The look on my husband's face when I told him about my promotion was priceless. He was genuinely happy for me and even took me out so we could celebrate my new promotion. At first, when I told Jordan about my new promotion, he was surprised. He thought I got it through hard work. My husband knew how hardworking I was, and so he never questioned it. Only if he knew at that time that I paid a huge price for that. My husband was the type of guy that liked celebrating achievements no matter how little it was. I made a stupid mistake by letting him slip out of my hands because of my own selfish interest. I was clouded by my own selfish interest that I hurt my husband in the process. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a means to an end. But honestly speaking, I didn't have the intention of going back to my boss for any promotion after the last time we met. But unfortunately, as the days went by, I found myself drawn to my boss more and more. Before I knew it, I was sleeping with him almost every day. I tried to justify my actions by telling myself that I was just maintaining my position and ensuring job security. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Everyone at the office was surprised at how quickly I got promoted, considering the fact that I was just a newbie. Working for 5 years in that office is considered a newbie compared to those who had worked for more than 5 years. At some point, some of the interns kept throwing subs at me, and I could tell they were indeed jealous about my new rank. Not everyone knew about my boss's dirty secret. Those that knew about it could attest to the fact that I had slept with the boss for the position. I kept cool and said no word to anyone, not even Pia. Pia also knew something was wrong, and on many occasions she confronted me about doing something. Despite the confrontation, I still didn't open up to her. I kept giving her excuses and denied it. As time went on, I lived past the guilt I felt. I stopped thinking too much about it and I moved on. Days, weeks, and months went by and I continued my affair with my boss. At some point, my boss and I were absent from work. I skipped work and often came up with some sort of excuses to justify my absence, and no one suspected me. My relationship with my boss was beyond work. Our affair became a regular thing and he often spent the night in my house. Sometimes I do sleep over at his house. My boss was married, but his wife was a businesswoman who often went on business trips. So it was very easy for my boss and I to hang out at his place. Things came to a head when my husband, who had been working overseas, surprised me with a visit. He had been suspicious of my late nights at work and constant changes in behavior. Apparently, I always missed Jordan's calls and didn't return them on time. And when I did, I often gave an excuse that I was busy at work. I lied to him about working late hours. He suspected that something was off and didn't buy my excuses. Just then, Jordan decided to come home. From the way I sounded on the phone, he thought maybe I missed him, and so he decided to pay me a visit. It was on a Thursday afternoon. On that fateful day, Jordan didn't inform me about his coming. He wanted to surprise me, but he ended up getting surprised after he walked in on me and my boss in a compromising position. His worst fears were confirmed. My boss and I were too busy to have even noticed my husband's presence. Jordan stood for a few seconds before we saw him. The look of betrayal and hurt on his face broke my heart. I couldn't even look at him twice in the face. I was so ashamed that I covered myself with the bedsheet. I had never seen him so broken, and it was all because of my foolish actions. He stormed out of the room, and I knew I had to face the consequences of my actions. Immediately, I got dressed and ran after him. Before I left, I ordered my boss to leave my house at once because my husband wouldn't spare him like he did if he came back the second time. I ran downstairs, but I couldn't find Jordan. I went outside to look for him. By the time I got outside, I saw him driving out of the compound. At that point, the realization of everything dawned on me, and I knew I had truly hurt my husband. I burst into tears. I fell on my knees and cried bitterly. I was so mad at myself. Everything became sour, and I didn't stop blaming myself. After a few minutes of wallowing in self-pity, I got hold of myself and went inside and met my boss inside. I got so angry that I wanted to give him a slap on his face, but I couldn't because he didn't force me into having an affair with him. After all, I was the one that took myself to meet him for my own selfish desire. My boss wasn't remorseful about what happened. I expected not to. In order for me not to create any scene, I ordered him out of my house, which he did, and banged the door behind him. I was left alone at that moment with my own conscience. The hurt I saw on Jordan's face pierced me so much that I wept. I couldn't muster the courage to even call him. Even if I did, he wouldn't have picked my call. With the way he stormed out, I knew he was furious. That day, I stayed all night waiting for my husband, but he didn't return home. I got so scared and kept having negative thoughts if something had happened to him. In between the night, I concluded on calling him. I tried his number, it kept on ringing, but no response. At some point when it rang, Jordan would cut the call and wouldn't pick up. 2 days later, my husband returned back home but refused to speak to me. He wouldn't even look at me. I begged for forgiveness, but he was too hurt to even consider it. My husband ignored me and paid deaf ears to all that I had to say. His silence made me more angry at myself. At that time, I thought of Jordan's reaction after he caught me cheating on him. Everywhere a normal man that caught his partner cheating would react immediately or by sending her out of the house, right? But Jordan was different. I thought maybe he would eventually forgive me since he sent me out. But I was absolutely wrong. My husband didn't send me out immediately because he was thinking about the perfect revenge for me. How I wish I knew what he planned at that time. I would have definitely not stayed a minute in that house. Jordan's revenge was inhumane, and I will have to deal with it from now onwards. In order to get back at me, my husband came up with a plan for revenge. He contacted my boss's wife and exposed our affair. How he got hold of my boss's wife was something that still baffles me up till now. My husband didn't even know the company I worked for did not talk about my boss prior to the incident. He only knows that I was a worker at a particular editing company. When my boss's wife got to know about the news, she didn't spare either of us. The scandal was all over the news and my boss was forced to resign. My boss worked for his wife. Apparently, my boss's wife was the owner of the company we all worked for. She was from a wealthy family and got the company out of the inheritance of her parents. My boss was made a manager and was meant to work like we the employees did. Everyone got to know about this after the scandal. I was immediately dismissed from the office. For months, I was left without a job and my marriage was on the brink of collapse. The news spread so fast, and before I knew what was happening, my face was printed and pasted all over the company's wall. My husband got me on that one. I felt so ashamed of myself. I couldn't go out or go close to the company. But the worst part of all of this was the guilt that had it till me. I had betrayed my husband's trust and destroyed our marriage. It was a price too high to pay for a promotion. I was so stupid that I didn't think about the outcome of my decision. Jordan's anger was justified. He had every right to be angry. My husband told me that his revenge was too soft, and we were lucky because if he had had his way that day, he would have captured the whole thing at that moment and published it. Update. The revenge my husband had on me got me depressed. I was literally shattered and couldn't even think of anything. All that was in my head at that moment was how I would be able to go outside. On the other hand was my husband Jordan. He wouldn't speak to me or eat anything I cooked. Jordan and I lived in the same house for 2 days before he finally did his worst. Exposing my affair with my boss to his wife and the public was the tip of the iceberg for him. You all wouldn't believe what he did next. Guys, I didn't know that the time Jordan didn't send me out was because he had sold the house we lived in to someone else. He sold the house the day he exposed my infidelity with my boss. He didn't inform me about it. I only got to know about it 2 days after he left the house. Before he left, my husband dropped a stack of divorce papers on the table. It was on a Monday morning. Before I could wake up from bed, my husband had vanished. His side of the wardrobe was empty. His cars were nowhere to be found. Even my car was missing also. I didn't understand what was going on at that moment, and I decided to call him. Immediately, he picked, and he was acting funny on the phone. My husband told me that I shouldn't bother looking for him because he was gone for good and never coming back. Before I could say anything, he ended the call on me. I was so angry that I didn't understand why my husband decided to punish me this way. After publishing my scandal and ridiculing my life, isn't that enough revenge for him? Why did he have to take my car and other valuables along with him? To even think that he signed the divorce papers and left it on the table for me. Before I could get hold of myself, I heard a knock on the door. Immediately, I went to see whether it was my husband. Maybe he was just pulling my legs. I opened the door, but to my greatest surprise, it wasn't my husband, but two strange faces. It was a man and a woman. Immediately, they saw me and they got confused. I was obviously looking unkempt, and I appeared like someone who had a lot going on. Of course, I did have a lot going on after that. My face was everywhere, and the scandal was the talk of the day. The two strangers introduced themselves. I need no one to tell me that they were couples. Mere looking at them, they really reminded me of Jordan and I back then. But then, guys, this couple were mean. It took them a few minutes before they quickly knew I was the lady who had an affair with her boss. The woman didn't hide her disgust, and she kept throwing subs at me. I composed myself and paid no attention to her. The man standing next to her wasn't an angel either. In fact, he was more than his partner, just that his tone of voice was condescending. I endured everything. After all, I deserve every bit of it. It was the price I had to pay for my actions. The couple told me about the transaction they had with Mr. Jordan, which happens to be my ex-husband. I told them I wasn't aware of any transactions, and they burst into laughter. They made a mockery of me and told me that the house now belongs to them, and they gave me 48 hours to vacate the premises. To even back what they were saying, they brought out a piece of paper which contained the agreement they had with my husband, Jordan. I was so shocked and surprised that I literally thought I was dreaming. I then realized at that moment why Jordan didn't send me out. He wanted to punish me by thinking I would end up staying in the house while he packed out. He left me stranded, and I didn't know what to do. My credit cards were among the things Jordan took from me. I was dumbfounded and didn't know what to do or say to the mean couple that stood in front of me. They saw how shocked I was and knew that my husband sold the house without informing me. They told me to vacate the property before they come back, and they wouldn't want to see me. They left with a face of mockery. I got inside and fell on the couch. I thought about what happened and began to search through my phone if I could get help from anyone. The few I called yield no results. Some didn't pick or return any of my calls and text messages. At that moment, I remembered Pia and called her, but she told me not to call her again because she doesn't want to have anything to do with me, because that would be putting her job at risk. They must caution all the staff at work not to talk to me. It was obvious because by the time I had gone to pack my stuff from my desk, everyone minded their business and kept mocking me until I was walked out by the security men. At that moment, Pia was my only hope, and she turned me down. I eventually moved out of the house after 48 hours and spent the night in an abandoned, dilapidated building. For months, I still couldn't secure any job. As I sit here alone and jobless, I can't help but think about my foolish decision. I wish I had never slept with my boss. I wish I could turn back time and make things right with my husband. But now, all I can do is hope for forgiveness from him somehow if that's possible, and try to repair the damage I have caused. The nightmares of my mistakes haunt me every night, and I am always unhappy that I let the love of my life slip through my hands.